The Nights of Fire in the Trees. Hello, my friend. This is Izora 9. If you're listening tonight as you drift into sleep, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. And if you enjoy this atmosphere of whispers and shadows, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Izora 9, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next chapters. Now, take a deep breath, loosen your shoulders, close your eyes. Let the forest carry you. They say the Ashwick Forest swallows names. Call a name into the trees and the wind will return it to you, but always missing one syllable. That stolen piece doesn't vanish. It lingers between the pines, waiting for the fire-lit nights. I returned to the village in late autumn, when frost clung white to the wooden fences and the forest on the horizon looked like a smear of ink across the sky. My name is Lynn, a student of anthropology, and I came back to gather material for my thesis on forgotten rituals. But the truth is, it wasn't just research that drew me back. In the attic of my family's old home, there was a tin chest filled with the field journals of my grandfather, a schoolteacher who once wrote about the nights when the forest burned with fire. I lifted the lid and smelled the damp musk of wood and paper. Inside were notebooks bound with rough covers, a worn knife, and a hand-drawn map sketched in charcoal. Across the edges, he had circled strange names no official map ever showed: Coalbank, Hidden Stone, the stopping post. At the bottom, he had scrawled a warning: when the crescent moon rises, the wind will turn. My Aunt Mai, who still lived in the village, set tea on the table and avoided looking at the map. "Don't go into the woods when the wind changes," she whispered. She told me that villagers once spoke of the fire nights, when glowing trails of light crawled across the forest floor like rivers of flame, drawing the willing and the unwilling deeper and deeper. "Long ago it was ritual," she said. "They gave something to the forest, and the forest gave the village a season of peace." I asked her what they gave. She didn't answer. She only shut the window tight, as if afraid the wind itself was listening. That evening, I carried a recorder to the forest's edge. The line between meadow and trees was thin as thread. The air smelled of wet soil, moss, and something oddly sweet, like burnt sugar. When I played the tape back later, I froze. Faint beneath the wind was the sound of drums. 3 beats, a pause, then 2, over and over. The next morning I showed it to Aunt Mai. She paled. "Your grandfather wrote about that rhythm. 3, pause, 2. That's not a song. That's a summons. It calls people by name. Not strangers, only those who already belong." That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my grandfather's notebook again. On one torn page, he had written, "The Ritual of Memory Exchange." He described how the villagers, in times of plague or famine, would surrender not a person, but a memory. A cherished recollection, a name spoken with love. In return, the forest offered survival. Not a body, he underlined, but a remembrance. But once the memory is gone, the name grows faint. The page ended abruptly, half ripped away. The last words trailed off. "If one offers it for the whole village, the night fire will..." and nothing more. I sought out Old Man Trien, caretaker of the shrine at the forest's mouth. The shrine was no more than a mossy wooden box, half swallowed by roots, with grass charms swaying like brittle fingers. "Light incense," he told me, not meeting my eyes. "And then forget." He pressed a dry twig into my hand. "If you hear the drums, snap this in 2. The wind will think you didn't hear. If you don't snap it..." He gave me a long look. "Then the wind will remember you." By the next dusk, I found myself following the charcoal marks on my grandfather's map. Through thickets, across a burned strip of earth called Coal Bank, until I reached Hidden Stone, a slab of granite pressed between 3 pines. On its surface were grooves. 3, pause, 2, the rhythm of the drums. I laid my palm against the stone. It was colder than steel. On the way back, I noticed something strung from a low branch. 2 cords twisted, 3 black beads woven between them, and at the bottom, strands of hair. When I sent a photo to a friend studying folklore symbols, the reply was just one word: don't. That night, the forest lit itself, not with flame, but with low glowing trails, as if fireflies had melted into streams of white light across the soil. They slithered between roots, weaving paths that weren't on any map. And then I heard it again. The drums, 3, pause, 2. The wind carried my name, not once, but 3 times, each time missing 1 syllable. I clutched the twig Trien had given me. Should I break it? Pretend not to hear? Or should I accept? I did not break it. The glowing trails pulled deeper into the forest. I followed. At the center clearing, the light faded, leaving only marks on the soil, a wide circle drawn in ash and charcoal. Around its rim were names, each carved incomplete, everyone missing a letter. But at one place, there was a gap, a space left empty. And I realized, with a chill, it was the exact size of my own name, Lynn, but missing the I. When I returned to the attic that night, my grandfather's chest was open. The notebook had flipped to the torn page. Beneath his half-finished line, new ink had appeared. Words scrawled as if written only moments ago. The night fire will return a name, and with it, a memory. Do not let my grandchild enter. The ink was still wet. That was the first night, the night the forest called me by name, and I knew deep in my bones that the ritual was not a myth. It was waiting, and the missing piece of my name was already in the forest's hands. The path not drawn on any map. Morning in Ashwick came gray and damp. Mist clung low across the meadow, blurring the line between land and forest until it felt as if the trees had crept closer overnight. I kept staring at my grandfather's notebook, at that new line of ink written as though from his hand, though he'd been dead for over a decade. Do not let my grandchild enter. But I had already entered, and the forest knew my name. That day I visited the village square, searching for anyone who might still remember the old ways. The market women avoided my questions, smiling politely but turning their backs. A group of children playing marbles fell silent when I asked about the fire nights. Even the church bell ringer, who had known my grandfather, crossed himself and whispered, "Better to forget." Forget. Always that word. Forget. By afternoon, I returned to the map. The next mark circled was the stopping post. Locals said it was just an old boundary stone where hunters once tied their horses. But when I asked for directions, they shook their heads. One man muttered, "The post doesn't stand anymore. Not since the drums called." I decided to follow the markings myself. The path led beyond the fields, into a bramble-thick stretch where no trails remained. Yet something strange happened. The air smelled faintly sweet again, like burnt sugar, guiding me as surely as any compass. After an hour of walking, I found it. The post was not stone at all, but wood, a weathered stake half swallowed by moss. The grooves where rope had once bitten deep were still visible. I reached out and pressed my hand against it. The world seemed to tilt. For a moment I smelled not moss, not wood, but iron and smoke, as if the forest had breathed into my lungs. Then I heard it. The drums. 3, pause, 2. But this time they weren't distant. They were inside the earth beneath my feet. I pulled back, heart hammering. On the wood where my hand had touched, a dark stain spread like spilled ink. The mark twisted, forming a single letter. I, the missing piece of my name. The forest was trying to give it back, or take it completely. I fled before nightfall. Back at the house, I told Aunt Mai what I had seen, her face drained of color. "Your grandfather gave the forest a name once," she whispered. "Not his own, someone else's. And in return, the sickness passed, the fields thrived. But the cost—" She broke off, staring at the window where the trees loomed dark. "Every name surrendered leaves a hollow in memory, in the family, in the heart. That's why no one speaks of it now. Too many hollows." She grasped my wrist, her nails digging lightly into my skin. "Promise me you won't go back." But how could I promise? The drums had already found me. That night I lay awake, the recorder running beside me. The hours dragged, and at last I slipped into uneasy half-sleep. When I checked the recording the next morning, my blood chilled. The drums were there. 3, pause, 2. Then a whisper, faint, childlike, learning the sounds of a word. Over and over it spoke. "Return the name. Return the name." Each time clearer, each time closer. Until finally, it said mine. Perfectly. I left the house before dawn, driven by something I didn't fully understand. The forest seemed to open for me, paths appearing where none existed, lit by a pale shimmer on the ground. Not fire this time, but ash, as if the earth itself remembered where flames had once run. And at the end of the ash path, I found something impossible. A circle of stones I had never seen on the map. Inside the circle lay scraps of paper, weathered but intact. I picked one up. A name written across it, half faded, the ink eaten away. Another scrap, another name, and another. All incomplete. Names the forest had eaten. And then, at the very center, one page less faded than the rest. A name I knew. My mother's. The forest of hollow names. The paper trembled in my hand. My mother's name. Incomplete. The final letter missing, as though swallowed whole. I stared at it, the ash-stained stones pressing in around me. My mother had never spoken of Ashwick, never spoken of her childhood. She left the village as soon as she was old enough and never returned. Now I understood why. The forest had taken her name, and perhaps more. I folded the scrap of paper and placed it in my pocket. The instant I did, the air shifted. The drums rolled faintly in the distance. 3, pause, 2. But this time, something else accompanied them. Voices, whispering, dozens of them, overlapping like wind through reeds. I knelt down, pressing my ear close to the soil. The whispers rose until they shaped into words, not prayers, not threats, but names, names spoken as if remembered and then let go. I stumbled back, heart pounding. Around the circle I saw faint grooves in the dirt. Not animal tracks, but footprints, small, children's perhaps, dozens of them circling the stones, wearing paths into the ground. And in the middle, where the scraps of names lay, the earth was sunken, dark as if something had been burned there long ago. The memory of my grandfather's unfinished journal echoed in me. If one offers it for the whole village, the night fire will... Would what? Protect them, destroy them, or worse, claim them all. When I returned home, Aunt Mai was waiting on the porch. She saw my face and knew. "You found it," she said quietly. I handed her the scrap of paper. She read the half-written name, lips tightening. "She doesn't know," she whispered. "Your mother never knew. She thought she left because of anger, because she didn't belong here. But the truth, she carried a hollow her whole life. Your grandfather gave her name away to the forest, to save us." My stomach turned cold. He sacrificed her? "Not her body," Mai said. "Her memory. Do you not see? She doesn't remember who she was. Not truly. That's why she never came back." That night, the whispers returned to me. I tried to block them out with pillows, with the hum of the old heater, but they seeped in through the walls. Not just names this time, phrases. "Give us the letter. Return what was taken. The hollow must be filled." I clutched my recorder like a weapon, and when I dared play it back, the words were clearer. The forest was calling not only for names, it was calling for me. At dawn, I went again to the forest. I couldn't stop myself. The ash path guided me, twisting deeper. Birds were silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. At the edge of a ravine, I saw something I had not expected. A house, half collapsed, leaning, swallowed by vines. The windows were shattered, the roof sagging, but carved into the lintel above the door were words still visible despite the rot. "Here we keep what must not be forgotten." Inside, dust and moss blanketed the rooms, and there in the back corner stood shelves, hundreds of them, lined with jars. Inside each jar floated scraps of paper, each with a fragment of ink, a syllable, a letter, a piece of a name. The forest had a library, and it was made of what people had given up. As I stepped closer, a jar rattled, then another. A low hum filled the air, as if the jars themselves were whispering. I reached for one at random. Inside was a scrap that bore only a single letter, the missing piece of my name. The glass grew warm under my touch. My vision blurred, and for an instant I wasn't in the ruined house at all. I was standing in the circle of ash. The drums were pounding around me, and a voice, childlike but sharp as bone, whispered in my ear, "Take it. Finish the name, or we will finish it for you." I staggered back, dropping the jar. It didn't shatter. Instead, it rolled neatly to the center of the floor and stopped, as though something invisible held it in place. Behind me, the forest breathed. The shelves rattled, the jars shook, the letters inside scraping against the glass like insects trying to escape. And I understood something then. The forest didn't just collect names. It was waiting for them to be completed, one letter at a time. And my name was next. The exchange of memory. That night, the storm came. Not rain, not thunder, but a storm of sound. The drums hammered through the walls of the house. 3, pause, 2, endless, relentless, until I thought my chest would crack with the rhythm. Every window quivered. The cupboards rattled, and beneath it, whispers filled the air like smoke, each one speaking fragments of names. Names I recognized, names from the village, names from my family. When I covered my ears, the sound grew louder. When I tried to speak, the whispers drowned me out. And then, suddenly, silence. On the kitchen table, my grandfather's notebook lay open. A new line had written itself in ink I didn't own. The forest does not want blood. The forest wants memory. Give it willingly, and it will keep you alive. Give it unwillingly, and it will take everything. At dawn, I found Aunt Mai waiting by the hearth. Her eyes were sunken, as if she hadn't slept in years. "You've seen the jars?" she said. Not a question. I nodded. "They were not always in that house," she whispered. "Once the ritual was held in the clearing. A child would bring something small, a pebble, a ribbon, a word. Then the elders would chant, and by morning, that child would forget a face, a day, sometimes even their own name. That memory would be gone, but the village would thrive. Her voice trembled. Your grandfather offered more. He gave away what he loved most. He gave away your mother's name. I felt the weight of the scrap in my pocket, the half-faded paper from the circle of stones. My mother's name, incomplete, waiting to be filled. Why me? I whispered. Why now? Because the hollow is never satisfied, Mai said. Names are like wells. They run dry, and when they do, the forest must be fed again. She leaned closer, gripping my arm. Do not return. If you walk into the fire night, you will not walk back. But the truth was already clawing at me. The forest wanted my name. It had left the eye out in the open, waiting. If I didn't choose, the forest would. That evening I returned to the ruined house. The shelves of jars glowed faintly in the dark, their glass bodies humming with low insect-like resonance. On the floor, the jar with the letter I still waited where I had dropped it. I knelt, staring at it. My breath fogged the glass. Inside, the scrap of paper pulsed faintly, as if alive. When I reached out, the world shifted. I was no longer in the house. I was standing in the clearing again, the ash circle glowing white-hot around me. Villagers stood at its edge, their faces blurred, their voices chanting. One stepped forward. His eyes were hollow. His mouth opened, and my grandfather's voice came out. Choose what to give. I looked down. In my hands were 2 slips of paper, one with my mother's name, the other my own. The chanting rose. The fire trails in the soil brightened. The forest demanded an answer. If I gave my name, I would lose myself. Forget who I was, vanish into a hollow. If I gave my mother's, she would never remember me, or herself, or the family she left behind. The choice clawed at me, and then, faintly, beneath the drums, I heard another sound. A child's voice, laughing, familiar. I turned and saw a small figure at the edge of the clearing. Dark hair, bare feet, a smile I recognized from old photographs. It was my mother, 7 years old, the age she had been when her name was given away. She raised a hand, pointing at the slips of paper. Then she spoke, and her voice cracked the air like a blade. It was never yours to give. The circle of ash erupted with fire. The slips of paper burned in my hands. The jars in the ruined house shattered. Names, letters, syllables, all of them screamed into the night, and the drums stopped. When I woke, I was back in the cabin. My hands were empty. The scrap with my mother's name was gone. On the table lay a single note, written in ink so dark it gleamed like oil. One memory has been returned, one remains. The hollow that remains. The forest was quiet after that night, too quiet. No drums, no whispers, no glow of fire creeping through the soil. But silence in Ashwick was never a gift. It was a warning. Aunt Mai found me sitting by the window at dawn. She studied me carefully, as though searching for something missing. "What did you give?" she asked. I couldn't answer. My pockets were empty, my hands bare. The scrap of my mother's name had vanished, consumed in the fire of the clearing. Yet in my chest I carried a hollow, sharp, and raw. That morning I tried to write in my journal. I wrote my name, Lynn. But halfway through, the letters blurred. The I slipped away like water, leaving only Lenach. I blinked hard, tried again. Again the eye was gone. The forest had not finished. By the third night, the dreams began. I walked through the ruined house of jars, though all the glass had shattered. The syllables once trapped inside drifted in the air like moths, brushing against my skin, whispering fragments of forgotten lives. In the center of the house lay a single jar, unbroken. Inside floated a paper scrap with 2 words written in dark ink. The Hollow. When I touched the glass, the whispering voices fell silent, and a child's laugh echoed through the rafters. My mother's laugh, the sound of a memory I had never truly owned. The next day, villagers gathered at the edge of the forest. They did not look at me, but I felt the weight of their silence. They had known this moment would come. The forest always asked again. An old woman finally spoke. "You carry what your grandfather began. One hollow is still unpaid. Go before the moon changes, or Ashwick will go barren." It wasn't anger in her tone, it was resignation, a truth older than the soil. That night I returned to the clearing. The circle of ash still marked the earth, though faint. The air was heavy, thick with damp and smoke. The drums returned, not distant this time, but inside my bones. 3. Pause. 2. The fire paths lit again, weaving toward me, and the circle flared alive. From the shadows a figure emerged. My grandfather. Or what remained of him. His eyes were empty, his body thin as smoke. He raised a trembling hand and offered me a choice. 2 slips of paper appeared at my feet. One bore my name, the other was blank. I bent down, staring at them. My voice trembled. "What does the blank mean?" The figure whispered, his words barely carried by the wind. "A hollow the forest can keep forever. Not a name, a memory." The fire roared higher. The drums pounded. If I gave my name, I would vanish into silence. If I gave a memory, I would live, but lose a part of myself, never to be recovered. The forest demanded payment. I thought of my mother, her laughter, the child's voice that haunted the clearing. I thought of Aunt Mai, of the village clinging to survival, season after season. And I thought of my own name, already fading each time I tried to write it. I picked up the blank slip. The fire shrieked. The drums broke into chaos. I felt something tear inside me, a thread pulling loose, a memory unspooling. It slipped from me before I could catch it. What memory? I don't know. That was the point. When the fire died, the clearing was empty. The slips of paper were gone, and so was something inside me. I stumbled back to the house. Aunt Mai waited, her eyes searching mine. "What did you give?" she whispered. I tried to answer, but I didn't know. The next morning, the forest was quiet again. The drums silent, the jars gone. The villagers returned to their lives as though nothing had happened. Only I carried the weight. Only I knew something had been taken. And when I looked in the mirror, I whispered my name aloud, just to test it. Lynn. The eye was still missing. A hollow remained. And perhaps that is how the Ashwick Forest keeps its bargains. Not with blood, not with lives, but with hollows so deep we never realize what's gone until it is too late. That is the end of the Ashwick Forest Rituals. If you've listened all the way through, tell me in the comments, what would you give the forest? A name or a memory? And if this story followed you into the dark, don't forget to like, subscribe to Izora 9, and ring the bell so you never miss the next journey into shadows. Good night. and may the forest never call your name.